Instant insanity? You're telling me that humans invented instant coffee? The salon executor's upper mouth twitched in disbelief, while their lower jaw worked through what appeared to be genuine existential distress. They took perfectly good coffee beans, processed them into this, and thought, yes, this is fine? Marcus leaned back in his chair, enjoying the alien's confusion far too much. Not only did we invent it, but there are people who prefer it. Some even consider it superior to fresh ground. Your species is insane. All four of the alien's eyes blinked in rapid succession. This explains so much about why the Galactic Council marked you for extinction. The instant coffee alone is grounds for it. The executor paused, mandibles clicking. Was that what you humans call a pun? Did I accidentally make a coffee pun? You did, Marcus said, beaming. And it was terrible. I'm proud of you. The conversation might have seemed strange to any outside observer. A human casually chatting with one of the most feared executioner species in the galaxy about coffee, of all things. But that was just how Marcus handled most situations, with a carefully cultivated air of couldn't care less that tended to throw people and aliens off balance. The fact that Earth was currently surrounded by a fleet of Salon warships didn't seem to bother him much either. Then again, Marcus wasn't exactly your average human representative. His business card, which he'd handed to the thoroughly confused executor upon their first meeting, read simply, Marcus Rivera, Death's Personnel Manager, Human Resources Division. The executor, who had introduced himself as Kexathari, which Marcus had immediately shortened to Kex because he claimed anything else would be way too much work to pronounce before coffee, was still staring at the instant coffee crystals like they might spontaneously combust. I still don't understand, Keck said, setting down the jar with the sort of careful precision usually reserved for handling antimatter. Your species faces extinction. We are here to carry out the council's judgment. Why are we discussing beverage preferences? Marcus shrugged, taking another sip from his mug. Fresh ground coffee, because he wasn't a monster. Well, you did ask what humans do that makes us unique in the galaxy. I figured starting with our questionable food decisions would be less traumatizing than jumping straight into our really weird stuff. There's worse than this. All four of Kex's eyes widened simultaneously. Ever heard of cheese? Because let me tell you about how humans discovered that letting milk go bad in very specific ways could be delicious. Stop. Kex held up one of his fur hands. Just stop. This conversation is not proceeding according to protocol. I am here to inform you of your species' impending execution, not discuss your disturbing food preservation techniques. Marcus nodded sagely. Fair enough. But you might want to check your species' execution authorization forms again. Specifically, subsection 7.3, paragraph 4, line 16. The executor's data cube materialized in his lower left hand, and he quickly scrolled through the documents. Marcus could pinpoint the exact moment Kex found the relevant section, because all four of his eyes began to twitch spasmodically. This must be a mistake, Kex mumbled, reading and rereading the line. This can't be correct. Oh, but it is, Marcus said cheerfully. Humanity signed a prior contract. An older one, much older, with death itself. Kex's voice had risen several octaves. That's impossible. Death is a concept, not an entity. The temperature in the room dropped several degrees, and the shadows in the corners seemed to deepen. Marcus's smile took on an edge that hadn't been there before. Want to bet on that? Before Kex could respond, a new figure materialized in the room. It didn't enter. It was simply there, as if it had always been there, and everyone else had just failed to notice until now. The figure wore a neat charcoal business suit rather than traditional robes, but the skeletal hands and void dark eye sockets were unmistakable. Good morning, said Death, in a voice that wasn't so much heard as felt in the marrow of one's bones. I believe someone was attempting to poach my client base. Kex made a sound that suggested several of his internal organs were trying to escape through his mouth simultaneously. Hey, boss, Marcus said casually. Want some coffee? It's the good stuff, not instant. Thank you, but I actually have a preference for tea. Earl Grey. Hot. Did Death just make a Star Trek reference? Kex whispered, seemingly having given up on understanding anything that was happening. Oh, yeah, boss is a huge nerd, Marcus said. You should see their comic book collection, but we're getting off track. Kex here was just about to explain why the Galactic Council thinks they have the authority to execute a species that's already under contract with Death itself. Indeed, said Death, settling into a chair that definitely hadn't been there a moment ago. I'm quite interested in hearing this explanation myself. Kex looked like he very much wished he'd called in sick to work today. That is, the Council's authority is absolute in matters of species management and extinction events. Absolutely adorable, Death commented, somehow managing to sound both amused and terrifying at the same time. But incorrect. You see, I have what you might call universal jurisdiction. Plus, Marcus added helpfully, we've got better benefits. Full dental. Great 401,000 matching. Excellent work-life balance, or work-death balance, I guess, in our case. I don't understand, Kex said weakly. What exactly are you saying? He's saying that humanity doesn't work for the Galactic Council, Marcus explained. We work for Death. Have since pretty much the beginning. Why do you think humans are the only species in the galaxy that named constellations after our mythological heroes? We've been helping with the paperwork since we figured out how to write. They're excellent administrators, Death agreed. Very creative with filing systems. And they make death meaningful. Do you know how boring entropy was before humans came along and started telling stories about it? But humans die all the time. Kex protested. How can you work for Death if you're not immortal? Marcus laughed. That's like asking how someone can work for a hospital if they get sick sometimes. Death's not about not dying. It's about making sure everything dies properly, when and how it's supposed to. It's about maintaining the balance. And humans, Death added, are exceptional at finding new and interesting ways to maintain that balance. Take your instant coffee, for example. Perfectly balanced between being technically coffee and also an affront to existence itself. See? Marcus gestured triumphantly. Boss gets it. Kex looked between Marcus and Death, mandibles working soundlessly for a moment before he finally managed to speak. So, what happens now? Now, Marcus grinned, now you get to go back to the Galactic Council and explain why they can't execute humanity. Because we've got a better job offer, excellent benefits, and, he paused dramatically, union protection. Very strong union, Death agreed. Literally supernatural bargaining power. But they'll never believe me, Kex protested. How am I supposed to explain this? Oh, that's easy, Marcus said, reaching into his desk drawer and pulling out a stack of papers. We've got forms for that. The next hour was spent watching Kex fill out what Marcus cheerfully referred to as the sorry, can't extinct humanity. They're already employment locked with an older contract paperwork in triplicate. Death occasionally offered helpful suggestions about proper form-filling technique, while Marcus made increasingly terrible puns about deadlines and skeleton crews. Finally, clutching the completed paperwork and all for hands, Kex stood to leave. He paused at the door, turning back to look at Marcus and Death. Just one more question, he said. Why? Why did Death choose humans as administrators? Because, Death said, rising from their chair, humans understand something that no other species truly does, that death isn't the enemy of life. It's what gives life meaning. Humans don't just accept death. They find ways to laugh in its face, to make jokes about it, to turn it into stories and songs and art. They make death part of life itself. Also, Marcus added, we're really good at paperwork. You wouldn't believe how many forms are involved in running the universe. As Kex left to face what would undoubtedly be a very interesting conversation with the Galactic Council, Marcus turned to Death with a grin. So, boss, should we tell them about the other departments? I hear Fate's looking for some new interns, and Love's administrative backlog is getting pretty serious. Death's eye sockets gleamed with what might have been amusement. All in good time, Marcus. All in good time. But first, Marcus said, let me guess. More paperwork? There's always more paperwork, Death paused. And perhaps some proper coffee? Definitely not instant. Now that, Marcus said, reaching for the coffee pot, is a truly universal constant. When the Galactic Council received Kex's report, along with the meticulously filled out paperwork in triplicate, they did what any sensible bureaucratic organization would do when faced with evidence that they'd accidentally tried to execute the species that handled Death's administrative work. They created a committee to study the situation. The committee, after 6 months of careful deliberation, came to 3 conclusions. 1. Attempting to execute humanity would create more paperwork than anyone was willing to deal with. 2. Death's union protection was indeed supernatural in scope and absolutely ironclad. 3. The human filing system was actually quite impressive and perhaps worth studying. In the end, the council did the only thing they could do. They offered humanity a consulting contract to help modernize their own administrative systems. Because if there's one thing bureaucrats across the universe can agree on, it's that good administrative staff is hard to find. And if sometimes, late at night, in the council's filing department, the staff claimed to hear the sound of bones clicking on a keyboard and someone making terrible puns about deadlines, well, that was just part of working with humanity's HR department. After all, Death's paperwork waits for no one. The water cooler paradox. 6 months after what the Galactic Council was now referring to as the HR incident, Marcus found himself explaining human concepts to yet another confused alien. This time, it was a Veloxy efficiency expert named Zix, who had been assigned to study humanity's administrative systems. "Let me get this straight," Zix said, their crystalline form refracting light in patterns that suggested deep confusion. "You're telling me that humans invented something called a water cooler moment specifically to be inefficient?" "Not inefficient," Marcus corrected, leaning against said water cooler. "Social. There's a difference. I fail to see it." "That's because you're thinking like an efficiency expert, not a humanity expert." Marcus took a sip from his coffee mug, which bore the text, "Dead Tired," with a cute cartoon skeleton sleeping on it. "Tell me, how do your people handle unexpected problems?" "We consult the Standard Operating Procedures Manual, of course." "Uh-huh. And what if the problem isn't in the manual? Then we file a request for manual updating procedures and wait for..." Zix stopped, their crystalline structure dimming slightly. "Oh, I see the inefficiency now." "Exactly. Humans, we gossip about it at the water cooler. Someone mentions a weird problem they're having. Someone else remembers seeing something similar last week. And before you know it, you've got an unofficial solution that works until the official one can catch up." "Quite ingenious, really," said Death, materializing next to the water cooler with their own mug reading "World's Best Boss." "Literally, I checked. I've found it reduces paperwork by approximately 23.7%. Zix made a high-pitched sound that suggested their crystalline structure was under stress. Do they always do that? Show up unexpectedly?" "Yeah, it's kind of their thing," Marcus shrugged. "You get used to it. Besides, Boss has the best office gossip. Omniscience does have its perks," Death agreed. Speaking of which, Marcus turned to Death. "Did you hear about what happened in Love's department last week? Apparently, Cupid tried to automate the arrow shooting process." "Oh, yes." Death's eye sockets gleamed with what might have been amusement. "Caused quite the stir in Fate's department. Something about probability chains getting tangled." Zix looked between them, their crystalline form flickering rapidly through various colors. This is not how universal forces are supposed to interact." "Says who?" Marcus asked. "The manual." "Well, yes." "Ah, see, there's your problem. You're still thinking inside the box. Humans, we look at the box and think, hey, that could be a pretty good fort if we had some blankets." "Creativity in the face of cosmic forces," Death nodded approvingly. "It's why I hired them in the first place. That, and they invented chocolate." "Wait." Zix's color shifted to a confused purple. "What does chocolate have to do with cosmic forces? Have you ever tried really good chocolate?" Marcus asked. "It's practically a religious experience. Quite literally in some cases," Death added. "The Aztecs had some fascinating ideas about cacao." Before Zix could process this new information, A memo materialized in front of Death in a puff of smoke. Death read it, somehow managing to convey concern despite having no facial features. "Oh, dear. Seems we have a situation." "What kind of situation?" Marcus asked, already reaching for his tablet. "Regular paperwork situation or apocalyptic situation?" "Somewhere in between, apparently. The Galactic Council's attempt to implement our filing system has created an interdimensional paperwork jam." "That's not supposed to happen, right?" Zix asked nervously. "Depends on your definition of supposed to," Marcus said, already pulling up forms on his tablet. "This is why you don't try to implement new systems without proper training, boss. We're going to need the D404 forms for dimensional disruption. Probably some P3S for paradox prevention, and perhaps the K99 forms." Death added. Marcus winced. "The catastrophic situation resolution forms? Is it that bad?" They tried to digitize the physical manifestation of bureaucratic frustration without proper containment procedures. Marcus nodded sagely. "Yeah, that'll do it. Better add some R1S for reality stabilization while we're at it." Zix watched in fascination as Marcus efficiently pulled up form after form, his fingers flying over the tablet's surface. How are you so calm about this?" This is nothing. You should have seen what happened when we had to help War update their conflict resolution protocols. Now that was a mess, literally and figuratively. But we got it sorted in the end," Death noted proudly. Marcus even won an award for most innovative use of Form X77 existential crisis management. "The trick," Marcus explained to Zix, "is understanding that chaos isn't the enemy of order. It's just order that hasn't been properly filed yet." As if to emphasize his point, a rift in space-time opened in the middle of the office, spewing forth a torrent of paperwork that arranged itself into a rough approximation of a threatening tentacle. "See?" Marcus said calmly, sipping his coffee. "That's just a standard Class 3 bureaucratic entity. Nothing some properly filed forms can't handle." He turned to Death. "Boss, want to handle the containment while I start on the paperwork?" "Certainly." Death adjusted their tie. "I've been meaning to have a chat with bureaucracy anyway. They've been getting a bit too metaphysically literal lately." As Death stepped forward to deal with the paperwork tentacle, which was now trying to file itself under T for tentacle in the nearby cabinet, Marcus turned to Zix with a grin. "So, still think water cooler conversations are inefficient?" Zix, watching as Death engaged in what appeared to be a heated debate with a manifestation of bureaucracy about proper filing procedures, could only shake their head. I think I need to update the manual." "That's the spirit," Marcus said cheerfully. "Now, want to help me fill out these reality stabilization forms? Fair warning, we might need to invent a few new words to properly describe what's happening." And so, as Death argued with the paperwork tentacle about the proper classification of interdimensional entities, Death insisted it should be filed under I for interdimensional rather than T for tentacle. Marcus and Zix settled in to handle the paperwork, because at the end of the day, that's what humanity did best. Face the impossible, make up some new rules, file the appropriate forms, and then take a coffee break to gossip about it. It wasn't exactly what the Galactic Council had in mind when they'd sent Zix to study human administrative systems, but it was perhaps exactly what they needed to learn. That, and maybe to invest in a better coffee maker. Some things, after all, were universal constants. The interdimensional office party, you know what this situation needs, Marcus said, watching as Death continued their heated debate with the paperwork tentacle, which had now evolved into a full-blown discussion about the merits of alphabetical versus categorical filing systems. An office party. Zix's crystalline form flickered in what Marcus had come to recognize as their equivalent of a double take. An office party during an interdimensional crisis? Especially during an interdimensional crisis. Marcus nodded sagely. See, what we've got here isn't just a paperwork problem. It's a cultural clash. And nothing bridges cultural gaps like horrible office parties with mediocre snacks and awkward small talk. That's actually quite clever. Death paused their argument with the tentacle long enough to comment. Bureaucracy has always been partial to proper protocols. Perhaps a formal gathering would help establish new parameters for interdimensional filing. The paperwork tentacle wavered thoughtfully, rearranging itself into what appeared to be a question mark. Exactly. Marcus was already pulling up a new form on his tablet. We'll need P47S for party planning, S12S for snack requisition, and probably NR13 for reality bending room reservation. You have forms for party planning? Zix asked incredulously. Of course we do. Have you met us? Humans will bureaucratize anything if you give us enough time. We once created a 27-page document just to standardize the procedure for replacing empty water cooler jugs. As I recall, Death added, that document included 3 appendices about proper water cooler gossip protocols. The appendices were very important. Marcus defended. You can't just have people gossiping without proper structure. That's how you end up with chaos entities manifesting in the break room. The paperwork tentacle suddenly perked up, reshaping itself into what looked suspiciously like a party hat. See? Even interdimensional bureaucratic manifestations understand the importance of office parties. Marcus grinned. Now, who wants to help me fill out the D23 form for dimensional decoration standards? 2 hours later, the office had been transformed. Streamers made of quantum-stable probability chains hung from the ceiling. A punch bowl filled with what Marcus assured everyone was mostly normal punch sat on a table. The slight glow and occasional ripple in spacetime around it was totally normal for office party punch. And a playlist of music that somehow managed to be simultaneously from all possible dimensions played softly in the background. Death had changed into a slightly more festive business suit. It had tiny skull cufflinks, and the paperwork tentacle had fashioned itself into various party decorations, occasionally shifting between forms when it thought no one was looking. I still don't understand, Zix said, watching as more interdimensional entities began arriving through various portals, rifts, and one particularly ambitious entrance through the coffee maker. How is this solving our filing system crisis? Watch and learn, Marcus said, adjusting his own party hat, which read Death's #1 HR manager in glowing letters that occasionally rearranged themselves into existential questions. First rule of office politics: nothing gets solved in meetings. Everything important happens at parties and around water coolers. As if to prove his point, Death was already engaged in what appeared to be a productive discussion with the manifestation of pure order about the benefits of controlled chaos and filing systems. Meanwhile, the original paperwork tentacle was enthusiastically showing a group of minor chaos entities how to properly fill out Form R7, request for regulated randomness. Is that time playing charades with entropy? Zix asked, their crystalline structure shifting rapidly through confused colors. Yep, they're old friends, actually. Or they will be. Or they have always been. It's a bit complicated with time, Marcus shrugged. Just don't ask about their relationship status. Last time someone did that, we had to file 17 different temporal paradox forms. 23, if you count the alternate timelines, Death corrected, passing by with a plate of cookies that seemed to exist in multiple states simultaneously. Right. Sorry, time. Paperwork always gives me a headache. Marcus turned back to Zix. The point is, sometimes the best way to handle a crisis is to get everyone in the same room with some snacks and let them work it out themselves. But that's not efficient. No, but it's effective. There's a difference. Marcus gestured around the room. Look, bureaucracy is learning to loosen up a bit. Order is discovering the benefits of flexible systems, and I'm pretty sure I just saw chaos fill out a proper request form for the first time ever. Indeed, across the room, a swirling vortex of pure chaos was carefully writing on a form, occasionally asking Death's advice about proper checkbox etiquette. This is impossible, Zix whispered. Nah, this is just humanity's special touch, Marcus grinned. We're really good at making the impossible look routine. Did you try the punch yet? It's got a little bit of everything. Literally, I think someone from Quantum's department helped mix it. Before Zix could respond, an alarm sounded. Not a harsh emergency alarm, but more of a gentle reminder chime. Perfect timing. Marcus checked his watch. Okay everyone, time for the team building exercise. Will it be trust falls again? Death asked, somehow managing to sound both resigned and amused. Last time, Gravity took it rather personally. Nah, I thought we'd try something new. Anyone up for interdimensional charades? The resulting chaos was, as Marcus later noted in his official report, exactly the right kind of chaos. Bureaucratic entities learned to loosen up, fundamental forces of the universe, discovered the joy of casual Friday, and somewhere between time trying to act out paperwork without using temporal manipulation and entropy, accidentally creating a new filing system through controlled decay, solutions were found. By the end of the party, the interdimensional paperwork jam had been resolved, 3 new forms had been created to handle similar situations in the future, and everyone had agreed that maybe, just maybe, the human approach to universal administration wasn't so bad after all. You see, Marcus explained to Zix as they helped clean up, which mostly involved convincing various reality warps to file themselves properly. The trick to dealing with cosmic forces isn't trying to control them, it's giving them a proper channel for expression, some decent snacks, and maybe a funny hat or two. Indeed, Death agreed, now wearing a party hat on top of their usual business attire. Humanity's greatest strength isn't their efficiency, it's their ability to make the infinite feel manageable and the cosmic feel mundane. Plus, Marcus added, we throw really good parties. The paperwork tentacle, now happily filed under I for interdimensional entity, formerly tentacular, wiggled in agreement. As the last of the guests departed through their various dimensional portals, Zix turned to Marcus with what appeared to be newfound respect. I think I need to completely rewrite my report to the council. Oh, what were you going to say before? Something about inefficiencies and procedural irregularities. Zix's crystalline form shifted to a thoughtful blue. Now, I think I'll just write. They make it work because they don't know it's not supposed to work. Marcus laughed. That's probably the most accurate description of humanity I've ever heard. Want to discuss it over coffee? I think the coffee maker's still a bit interdimensional, but that just means every cup is an adventure. And perhaps, Death added, picking up a leftover cookie that existed in 7 dimensions simultaneously, we should start planning next month's party. I hear Fate's department is having some issues with probability chains again. See? Marcus grinned at Zix. This is why we have the water cooler conversations. You never know when you'll need to plan another party to save the universe. The coffee maker gurgled in what might have been agreement, producing a cup of coffee that glowed slightly and may or may not have contained the secrets of the universe. Just another day in Death's HR department. The performance review paradox, it's that time of year again, Marcus announced, staring at his calendar with the kind of resignation usually reserved for people facing eldritch horrors, which, given his line of work, was a surprisingly frequent occurrence. What time? Zix asked, their crystalline form shifting to a curious amber. After the success of the interdimensional office party, they had been permanently assigned as the Galactic Council's liaison to Death's HR department. Performance review season. Even Death, materializing by the water cooler, seemed to slouch slightly. Yes. Even I cannot escape the inevitable march of administrative procedures. But you're Death. Zix protested. Who could possibly review Death's performance? Oh, you'd be surprised, Marcus said, pulling up a frighteningly large stack of forms on his tablet. We've got reviews coming in from life, time, fate, various religious departments, philosophical concepts, and my personal favorite, customer service satisfaction surveys from recently deceased beings. Those are actually quite helpful, Death noted. I've made several improvements to my scythe-wielding technique based on feedback. Remember that one guy who suggested you try a more modern look? That's why Boss switched to the business suits, Marcus grinned. The approval ratings went up 12% after that. This is insane, Zix declared, their color shifting to a distressed mauve. You can't just treat fundamental forces of the universe like office workers. Why not? Marcus asked. Works better than treating them like untouchable cosmic forces. You should see Life's department. They've got a jungle theme going, complete with motivational posters that actually evolve new messages over time. Quite creative, Death agreed. Though I prefer our minimalist aesthetic. Much easier to keep clean. Before Zix could process this new level of cosmic bureaucracy, a new crisis arrived in the form of an urgent memo materializing in front of Death in a puff of black smoke. "Oh no," Marcus said, reading over Death's shoulder. "Please tell me that's not what I think it is." "I'm afraid so," Death sighed. Fate's department has scheduled their performance reviews for the same temporal slot as Destiny's department. But that's impossible. We specifically set up the P89 forms for paradox prevention and scheduling. Apparently, both departments claim it was meant to be this way. "Of course they do," Marcus groaned. "They always pull this during review season." "Okay. We're going to need the T45 forms for temporal conflict resolution, probably some D17s for departmental dispute management, and better add a couple of our 99s for reality reconstruction, just in case." "Just in case of what?" Zix asked nervously. "Last time Fate and Destiny got into a scheduling conflict, we ended up with 3 alternate timelines and a very confused Shakespeare who wrote Hamlet as a romantic comedy. That was actually quite entertaining," Death mused, though the choreography in the sword fight scene was a bit much. "Focus, boss. We've got a potential temporal crisis to manage." Marcus was already pulling up more forms. "Zix, I'm going to need your help with the interdepartmental paperwork. How's your paradox prevention certification? My what? Right, we'll have to do this the quick way." Marcus handed Zix a tablet. "Just remember, if you see any forms that appear to exist and not exist simultaneously, mark them with the quantum stamp and file them under Schreidinger's paperwork." As if on cue, 2 different versions of the same door appeared in the office, one leading to Fate's department and one to Destiny's. Through both, they could hear the sound of increasingly heated arguments about proper scheduling protocols. "Okay," Marcus said, straightening his tie. "Here's the plan. Boss, you handle the temporal stabilization. I'll deal with the department heads. Zix, you're on paperwork duty. And someone please make sure Time doesn't try to solve this by creating another Tuesday. We're still dealing with the paperwork from the last extra Tuesday they made." "Already on it," Death said, producing a sleek day planner that seemed to contain the entire timeline of the universe. "I've got time booked for a working lunch to discuss proper temporal management protocols." "Perfect. Now, let's go prevent a paradox before both departments try to claim their review scheduling was predestined." Marcus paused again. The next few hours were a blur of interdepartmental negotiations, temporal realignment procedures, and what might have been the most complex game of calendar Tetris ever attempted in any dimension. Fate and Destiny were eventually convinced to alternate their review schedules with the help of some carefully worded prophecies and a promise of premium coffee in their break rooms. Time agreed not to create any more duplicate days without proper paperwork, and only 3 minor temporal paradoxes had to be filed under acceptable workplace incidents. "I don't understand," Zix said later, after the crisis had been resolved and they were all enjoying some well-deserved coffee which may or may not have been brewing in all possible temporal states simultaneously. "How do you handle this level of cosmic complexity on a daily basis?" "Simple," Marcus said. "We treat it like any other office job. Sure, the stakes are higher, and the paperwork occasionally tries to rewrite reality, but at the end of the day, it's all about proper management, clear communication, and knowing which forms to file, and having a good team," Death added, somehow managing to look proud despite lacking facial features. "Humanity's greatest strength is their ability to take the incomprehensible and turn it into a proper filing system. Plus," Marcus grinned, "we're really good at improvising when the filing system tries to achieve sentience and stage a coup." "That can happen?" Zix asked, alarmed. "Oh, yeah, that's why we have the F666 forms. Filing cabinet apprising prevention procedures. Want to help me fill out this week's check?" As Zix learned to properly document potential filing cabinet rebellions, Marcus couldn't help but smile. Just another day in Death's HR department, where the coffee was questionably temporal, the paperwork was occasionally sentient, and humanity continued to prove that the best way to handle cosmic forces was to treat them like slightly difficult co-workers. Oh, by the way, Marcus said suddenly, don't forget that next week is the interdepartmental potluck. Life's bringing evolution accelerated guacamole again. Excellent, Death said, though perhaps this time we should warn people about the speed at which it evolves. Last time, someone's dip achieved sentience and tried to file for employee benefits. Don't worry, Marcus assured them. I've already got the S-23 forms ready. Sentient snack situation management. Because in Death's HR department, there was a form for everything, even evolving appetizers. To be continued.